book lovers. It's Friday. We're live. I'm Mark. This is Jeremy. And this is the Thinking on Paper Book Club. And in a world that increasingly tries to homogenize you, compartmentalize you, and put you in a box just like everybody else, this is your weekly check-in with your humanity. There are no bad questions. There are no wrong questions. We're keeping critical thinking alive, Jeremy, right here in a book club. Who would have thought it? We are reading Karen Howe, Empire of AI. My camera is backwards. I will sort that out in due course. We're on part 3, and we've moved on from the horrendous working conditions of part 2, OpenAI outsourcing its human reinforcement learnings, and we're moving into government. Oh yes, we're talking politics. We're going to be talking politics, power dynamics, OpenAI, gods and demons, doom versus boom, salvation versus catastrophe. Part 3, Jeremy. Welcome to the show, by the way. How you doing?
I'm great, Mark. Always fun to see you for these live book clubs. We're actually already getting some great questions popping in on the chat, so we'll be jumping into those very very soon. I had an interesting thought so I read the book, I underline stuff, I make notes just like you do, and then I consolidate my notes into like a document that kind of synthesizes the stuff, and then I usually write about it and try to connect the dots. Writing is thinking on paper, as we know. And came across an interesting analogy because I was not an analogy, but just a lot of the stuff we're reading, Mark, is about the effects on the unseen. And we'll talk about a lot of this too. We refer to it in the outsourcing of parsing these data models, right? And having these people in Kenya reading just terrible stuff. And now we're going to go into, having people now see terrible stuff that you can't
Yeah.
unsee, right? And
We've moved countries though. We're in India now, so
we're in India now, so
everyone
right,
gets a shout.
we're trying to mess people up across the globe in a very oriented way. No, I got on top of this thing and I started thinking like, all right, here's the way it was done due to rules of scale at all costs, push at all costs, get it out there, get it done no matter what happens. And I started thinking about, okay, Jeremy, like, how would you do this differently? What would you do differently to build what is being built? And I had an immediate analogy to a company or a kind of an initiative in a company that I started called TuneWell, and it was basically like this pre-cleared library of music for filmmakers to use, for advertisers to use, and all of that stuff. In one model, I could have just grabbed all of their stuff and sequestered it and started selling it to people and started pushing it out the door. But I had individual conversations with everybody. I told them what we were doing with their stuff. I respected the ingredients. I don't know. That's where I got on my head if I were to redo this. But guess what? I wouldn't be participating in the rules of scale and the economies that everyone is driven to build something no matter the cost. So anyway, that's where I'm starting with this.
And that's why, Jeremy, with all due respect and no offense intended, you'd make a lousy CEO of a mega big tech company.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, it's the world has enough of those already, I think. Was your project better for your moral standpoint in the end?
I mean, we did okay. I didn't raise like $3 million to pull it off, so I didn't have to answer to anybody, which was cool. But even if you have money, hold the morals, hold your position in that as well. But we did okay. We did okay. And help some great bands get into movies and all of that stuff. But
Who does Sam Altman answer to? You said because it's very nice to
whew,
live in a world where you don't
yeah.
answer to anyone. I think you can do that. You can be a freelance writer. You can be self-employed. You can be a billionaire tech CEO. There are a few other ways, but who do you think he answers to?
Man,
Anybody?
I don't even. That's hard to answer because I can't get into his experience of qualia. which we
Who
talk about
should
a
he?
lot. The world in a way, right? Like but here's the problem though. Like I landed on this too, and then and we'll get back into the chapters, everybody. But this is kind of setting the stage. Like we aren't ever presented the full effects of the technology in which we participate. And I started
Right.
really thinking about that. And it's not like ChatGPT came out and it was like, hey guys, here's this great thing to use. But guess what? We had to do some really jacked up stuff to pull it off. Are you guys okay that we screwed up people in Kenya and with Dolly we screwed up people in India just to make these images cooler and better? If you guys are cool with that, like that's never presented. It's just like, hey, that's a collateral damage, right? Which we
Well,
both
we get
find.
into that in the chapter to prophets. I think it is when they go to Washington and and Sam Altman stands up and testifies, and others testify, and perhaps we're giving too much bandwidth to Sam Altman. His open eyes. He's not the only one there. We learned that in part one. But they stand up and they give evidence, and they, whether by intent or whether by accident or just because of their personalities, they constructed a narrative around what they were doing to remove that from the picture, to focus on curing cancer, for example, to focus on improving humanity, to focus on the other aspects of it at the expense of us knowing about the bad side effects of it by design.
By design. There you have it. There you have it. Well,
There you
let's
have
get
it.
into 10 gods and demons. A couple of sentences that jumped out at me real quick. The cognitive dissonance between the future and the present, between narrative and reality. And another quote as she talks about the gap that she witnessed in San Francisco between the haves and the have-nots, so to speak, the realities of how the other half lived. And that carries over to all the other things that we're going to see in a lot of these chapters. Um, let's talk about EA a little bit. Let's talk about
Hold
a
on, just
oh
just so like I just want to comment on that. I think
yeah.
that's Karen Howe is continuing creating this empire, and that dissonance between that booming San Francisco a few years ago and how they were in their bubble, if you like, of scaling and success. And these people have spent too much time at Burning Man because they're just disconnected from the real world, not only the real world at large, but the real world of San Francisco. And they just think that this their San Francisco, this luxury bubble that they're in, is San Francisco, just like they think that Silicon Valley is the world. They're disconnected. There's this massive dissonance. And I think that's why she's hammering that home to create this idea of empire and the leaders of the empire.
Yeah, great
Well
call
thought.
out. Great way to expand on that as well. And going back to the effects on the unseen that I mentioned
Yeah.
earlier, she does a good job of setting the tone there. She touches
But
on
EA, you were saying, sorry,
she touches
effective
on
altruism.
effective altruism, which was this, kind of this idea that you go make your money as quick and as fast as you can. Hey, what does that sound like? The scaling laws, right? And the mindset of that. And then no matter how you make your money, and then at the very end, when you have all your money, then you can do good things with it. We learned about SBF, and FTX was part of
Yeah,
that whole
who
thing.
was the poster boy of effective altruism back then?
Right, right. So the inherent
Sam
dichotomy in
Bankman-Fried.
that is just is mind-boggling, but also uh, very kind of tied into what you talked about in just the bubble in San Francisco and Silicon Valley and all of that stuff. Um,
Perhaps we just with that as well, with that Sam Bankman-Fried bit, maybe there was an, an, a pearl in the AI story that because of that relationship, because that he'd invested other people's $500 million into Anthropic, that some of the people who lost money in the FTX crash and the FTX scandal and the FTX crime would get their money back because that money that had invested in Anthropic was obviously is worth a lot more So they used that profit to pay some of the people back from FTX.
I would argue that's more effective altruism than all the other bullshit that they talk about.
Is Sam Fang is FBF sitting in a jail somewhere going, it was all effective altruism, really. FTX. That's what we were trying to do.
Jeez, man. All right, we got a lot to run through today. Let's talk about AI timeline versus P-doom, or probability of doom. So this is where the stage is set between the boomers and the doomers, and not like boomers as in baby boomers, but boomers related to people just. I would guess. How would you define the boomer side of this?
Well, it's like our doom, dystopia, utopia scale, isn't it? And
it is
the doom. It's super intelligence. It's the paperclip factory. It's AGI coming and exterminating us all. It is most powerful. And the flip side of that coin is the utopian AI picture that we've painted in our other shows about we've cured cancer, we've cured financial imbalance, we've saved the environment, we've eradicated illness. We all live to 150.
Oh, plus also just along those lines, and we'll get into it in the data center chapter here. But Sam Altman basically projects that AI will figure out nuclear fusion, and the whole power thing won't be an issue anymore. Okay, so we're moving from this LLM to multimodal kind of thing in this, right? So we go from this idea of just text stuff happening. You've got other modes, you've got images, you've got things beyond text. So Aditya Ramesh, the guy that put together the original model that turned into DALL-E, 12 billion parameters, text to image, 250 million images crammed into the transformer to make that happen. And this is where diffusion,
which they'd stolen off Twitter, hadn't they?
Yeah, just scraped it off Twitter, and largely pornographic content, surprisingly.
Can we stop using the word scraped and use the word steal, the verb steal instead?
Yeah, scraped is
like, did they invent that word? I bet they did, didn't they? It was part of their, let's just mask what the truth is. Yeah, they stole, they stole these images.
Yep. And we start talking about diffusion, which this piece of it is interesting. Like the technology itself, aside from all the shenanigans that happen in trying to scale the technology as quickly as possible, but diffusion, pretty interesting, like how that works just from a high level, in the fact that you start with an image, you add some noise to that image until it's completely scrambled, and then you teach the model to remove the noise to create images. I thought that was really kind of an interesting piece of the puzzle. And then stable diffusion, as a competitor to DALL-E, kind of proved, and Karen Howe highlights this, proves that scale is not the only way to do it, because stable diffusion did something arguably at a higher quality than DALL-E with 250 A100s using this diffusion methodology. So I thought that was interesting, because we're talking about scale, and this guy's got to beat this guy. We got to have more chips. We got to have more money. We got to have more data. We got to have all this stuff, because I want to beat you. You want to beat me. But scale doesn't always produce the best thing. I thought that was an interesting little call out.
Yep. And DALL-E, there was a lot of fanfare about DALL-E, wasn't there? But it petered out very quickly. I guess it was all incorporated into ChatGPT, and as an individual project kind of disappeared. You mentioned the images that they stole from Twitter. They actually had an agreement with Khan and the Khan school, so they got some information from them. They took stuff from YouTube, and it was all to do with their bottleneck, which to quote Karen Howe, what had on the face of it been OpenAI's easiest goal in its 2021 research map had turned out to be the hardest. More existentially, OpenAI had run out of data.
So now it was like, Yeah, now it's just like we just need more data. We don't care what it is, right? So this stealing of Twitter data, right? To use the right language. They found out that a lot of that data was sexually explicit imagery, right? And the researchers were like, no, we actually gotta have that in our data set because it's such a large part of the image data set on the internet. And removing it makes the tool perform worse. And this was crazy, man. Like in how awful to look at this. Another thing that they missed as far as a guardrail, and they said removing that kind of data made it worse at generating images of women and people of color. And this is crazy because a significant portion of that content for both groups on the internet is sexually explicit. Like, man, like if you just think about just the human side of things related to that, it's like that was hard to read.
We're beastly on the internet, aren't we?
Oh my gosh, way to yeah. So and then you got there's this guy Shane Jones. He's an AI engineer at Microsoft. He's messing around with Copilot's Designer, which is this version, basically a reskin version of Dolly, right? As a Microsoft thing, and he's like, oh no, it is generating terrible stuff from prompts that weren't necessarily that terrible. Hey, Microsoft, this bad shit's happening. Like, we should do something about it. Shut up, Shane. We're trying to scale. And Shane's like, all right, well, I'm going to write a letter to the FTC, Federal Trade Commission. Yo, guys, there is some really bad shit happening over here. Oh, don't worry about it, Shane. We're good. We're going to clear the path for scale. So, again, here we go, scale in favor of what's good for humanity. But everyone loved Dolly. It was great. We could like make chairs out of avocados and stuff. But
Yeah.
good gracious.
all of that money, all of that input, all of those lives, and all we got as a culture out of it for a good few weeks was images of Miyazaki cartoons with your face in them. And I hated that at the time. And thinking about it now, like that, why, why does the avocado chair, why does the Miyazaki imagery, why does that have to, why does that dominate so much of the world? Why does it dominate so much of the narrative? Why is it so vital? Like this playful, almost stupid, idiotic use of a technology that has literally cost billions and billions of dollars and cost lives and cost minds, and that's what it's used for.
We
It's
love we
just,
love to be amused. We love to be
but isn't
amused.
but an avocado chair? It's not exactly. It's not exactly a Monty Python, is it? It's not Bill Hicks. It's not being amused by. I'm just showing what I like, but like an avocado chair and your face as a Miyazaki cartoon, really?
Yeah. Easy
Let me
bud.
entertain you.
Yeah. Well, and so in back again, we were looking at this run out of data thing as we continue with this. So Sutskever has an idea. Hey, I know where we can find more data. Let's go to YouTube. There's a million hours of footage that we can just, shall we say, scrape.
Well, if he's taken thinking on paper, if he's stolen thinking on paper off YouTube, he owes us an interview. So, Suskava, Ilya, if you're watching, please
I'm
come
good
on the
with that.
show
We
and
could we could
defend
do that
your
as a
corner.
trade off. I'm okay with that as a trade off. That's good. Um, all right. So again, the theme continues. Um, things are getting removed from a safety perspective for the sake of fast, demonstrable performance. The monitoring platform, that was in place, very basic, but some other things like developer review processing, their developer review process, that gets removed because we're trying to scale quickly. Yeah, we're just kind of hearing more of the same kind of stuff.
Okay, but I'm going to take it forward then, because
Yeah,
with all that new data, with the success of DALL-E, they OpenAI get ready to release GPT 3.5, and internally in OpenAI, they don't see 3.5 as much of an improvement on 3. They're not expecting big things. They're releasing it as a commercial product, buying time for their grandiose GPT-4, which is internally, that's all their kind of excitement is about GPT-4. But because of potential rivalry from Google, because of Meta, I'm not sure at what point Meta enter the timeline, but competition, first mover advantage, they have to get a product out there. And they release GPT 3.5 and they go to bed, or wherever they sleep in their cryogenic chambers. They go to their cryogenic chambers
oh my gosh,
and sleep with Brian Johnson's blueprint for longevity. And they wake up and the servers have crashed. Japan has gone crazy first. They're all using GPT 3.5. The world, to quote, is now, I don't, is living in the world of OpenAI. Everyone goes crazy. All the servers break. Microsoft, OpenAI have to react quickly. They start moving GPUs from Microsoft products into OpenAI. They start moving energy. They have to try and react to make sure that the workers keep using GPT 3.5. They're blown away by its success. And that success is what drives what comes next. They $700,000 a day on compute costs at this point.
that was crazy. Say that again. Say that one more time.
$700,000 a day on compute costs. And then that was an estimate from the book. And yeah, it's a lot happens in that shift, because you have Microsoft funding OpenAI. And this was the moment where OpenAI they take the lead. Okay, now it's more about OpenAI. We don't need Microsoft anymore. We can get somebody else, but Microsoft can't get another OpenAI. So this massive power dynamic shifts, and Sam Altman, he goes above Bill Gates in the empire, in the mafia hierarchy, and it's a big moment. But they don't have the capacity to serve all the people, do they? They don't have enough compute. They don't have enough GPUs. They don't have enough data centers to keep up with the demand. And as the models become more compute heavy, what comes next? They just don't have the means, so they have to act.
Well, and by the way, this was just a quote low-key research preview, this release of ChatGPT, right?
Internally, they weren't very excited about it. They thought it wasn't much of an improvement on 3, and they were really reading between the lines, buying time before GPT-4.
So a little bit more into this, they wake up, the GPUs are melting, they're trying to figure out how to reallocate GPUs, and now they're dealing with not just supporting the research side and the model training, they're supporting product and service delivery, and a lot of things start happening. Microsoft now embeds some folks into OpenAI. OpenAI is like, what are these guys doing here? Microsoft also finds that they've lost the ability in the versions of the model that they see on their side during this release time. They can't examine the weights. They can't examine the data that they used to be able to examine. So there's been some shuttering of access to certain things. And Microsoft starting to get a little pissed off, and they're competing for the same customers using the same offering. But you know what makes it all better? You know what makes it all better? They had a 21% or 21x increase in their use of Azure cloud services. So they're like, hey, it's all good. I don't care if I can't see the weights anymore. I don't care if I can't see the training data. We're good because we're 21x, man. I'm good. I would really be a shitty big tech company CEO. I really would.
Did
I would
they
get
block the
I would get
weights?
my ass
Did they
kicked.
stop Microsoft being able to see the weight distribution of the models?
That's
They
what it
did, didn't
said
they?
in the book. Yeah.
What does that
Or
look
they
like
limited
from a,
or they limited access, or they couldn't see as much as they could see before.
so what does that look like from a business perspective? I mean, that seems like a dramatic shift in the strategy of the relationship. Surely,
Well,
some people in Microsoft must have been like, Bill Gates was going, hold on, I want to see the weights. You can't, Bill.
no, Bill Gates was cool because it got a 5 on the AP biology exam. So everything was cool in his mind. He was off to do other things, I think.
But they couldn't prove that it hadn't been in the data set, could it, for that exam?
Right, right. Was it actually reasoning, or was it just spitting out the answers that had been
Yeah.
fed? All right, so we have this, you know, Microsoft's building Bing Chat, and OpenAI has ChatGPT. Microsoft's like, man, with this dynamic we've just been talking about. But what effects does that have on the infrastructure that is used to power these things? So now let's dive into data centers. Let's talk about Chile. Let's talk about Uruguay, and more on this idea of the extraction economy, empire building. Off we go.
I love how Americans pronounce Chile and Uruguay. Yours is much better, much more Spanish.
Well, I'm dangerous. I can speak a little Spanish, so I try to give it respect when I say it.
You well, good. Plundered Earth, yeah. Environmental extractivism, water stress, data centers, the lithium supply chain again, and chapter 11 and 10, they're almost like a business case study, and you can look at it how you like. But then she comes straight back into the human cost of it, and how these AI externalities just seem to be pushed over there. Oh, look, there's a nice vulnerable country. There's a nice easily corrupted company. They don't have any work. They need this. Let's do it over there.
And it's
Let's
a
go.
favor. It's a favor to them. It's a favor to them. And yeah, all right, let's start. So I didn't know Chile's exports 60% were copper and lithium. Those are two of the biggest things that build this kind of technology, right? And the history on the Chile project, 1956, where they're basically creating capitalism at all costs, converts through the Milton Friedman school of capitalism, school of economics. They Pinochet, I think that's how you pronounce that, was put
Yeah.
into power through a coup orchestrated by the CIA. We're gonna get our plugs pulled here in a minute, but if you guys don't believe, so as I was reading that, I read a book a while back. I shared this with you. If listeners, if you don't believe that something like that is possible, there's a book called Confessions of an Economic Hitman that goes through case upon case upon case upon case where leadership in countries is overthrown and people are put in that are to the economic advantage of certain countries. So if you want more on that, you want a deep dive on that, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. But here we go. The extraction economy, 2024, we have 28 new data centers going into the country, 2.6 billion in foreign investment.
Yep. The AI boom arrived in Chile, ground zero for lithium and copper extraction.
But Mark, that's great though, right? For a country, 2.6 billion in investment. That's a good thing, right?
What was
I'm
interesting
being
on
a little facetious.
facetious.
Yeah.
Um, it was interesting about the first Google data centers. I don't know if I can't remember if it was in Chile or Uruguay when they're speaking about that, and but how few jobs these data centers actually create. So you're in the data center space. You know how
Yep.
many people work in a data center. I don't know how many people work in a data center. I imagine them. I picture them in my head a bit like I'm familiar with those massive Amazon distribution warehouses that over in the UK we have these big steel faceless Amazon distribution warehouses. And I imagine they're a bit like that, bit bigger inside, most very a lack of humans in it, mostly machines, mostly robots, a few overseers perhaps. And she speaks about the first to open in South America by Google and how few people they employ, and even the jobs that they do employ. It's English speakers only. So they're actually blocking
Yeah,
the local out of it anyway. If you don't speak English, you can't apply for the job anyway. So yes, that investment sounds good. Where's it going? Where's that 2.6 billion going?
construction costs, capital construction.
Who's it going to? Who? Where does
Not
that
probably not local
follow the
people.
money?
Probably not
Yeah,
local people, because local people can't build a data center of that size, arguably, right? These, you have multiple megawatts. You need specialists to build that with experience. Those specialists largely come from out of country.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
and
put your data center hat on, Joe. I mean, give us some terawatt, give us some megawatt, give us some numbers. What are we looking at?
some
What's a mega
numbers.
campus?
Oh, I mean, picture what's as is referenced in the book, 1.5 to 3 times the electrical capacity of San Francisco, right?
Yeah,
Was a reference in here. That's pretty crazy. And just a reminder, she referenced in the book too, roughly these, a rack of these GPUs, no matter, it's a V100, A100, H100, whatever it is. Obviously, the increasing, the newer models are more power dense, right? But 3x more power required than regular chips, right? So these data centers with these GPUs are tend to be 3x more power 3x on the power requirements than traditional, compute support. So the
yeah.
scale of this is
Well, quote here, until recently, the largest data centers were designed to be around 150 megawatt facilities, meaning they could consume as much energy annually as close to 122,000 American households. Developers and utility companies are now preparing for AI mega campuses that could soon require 1,000 to 2,000 megawatts of power. A single one could use as much energy per year as around 1.5 to 3.5 San Francisco's. At one point later in the book, she mentions a data center consuming the power of New York. And linking this to our show with the Microsoft guys and girls that we had on a few weeks ago, of course, there's another cost to this, a knock-on effect. So it's not just the fact that these data centers require huge amounts of electricity to run, and people can rationalize and think that that's okay, that's the cost that we pay, right? Okay, we need these buildings, they require a lot of electricity or energy, okay. But the knock-on effect of that, of course, is that the energy companies aren't going to suddenly start using sustainable energy because they need an increase of energy, of electricity, and they need it now and they need it quickly. And the only way, or the best way, the most efficient way to get that is fossil fuels. So you get this really horrible vicious cycle of, so okay, we need more energy, we're going to use fossil fuel extraction, but hey, we've got AI now, so we can help to make that more efficient. And
well, there's a debunking of that too that I want to get into on the climate side in AI. But to be clear, we understand and we're aware that data centers are making what you and I, Mark, are doing right now possible. The
yeah,
network, the storage, all of that stuff is possible. And I think what some of the people, some of the the unseen, we talk about as the unseen people that Karen Howe references in this book, they also agree with that the infrastructure is required to participate in these new technologies that can actually be good and helpful and that sort of thing. But it's the scale at which everything is happening. You imagine, like, if you're in a car going 200 miles an hour and you're trying to get from A to B, you don't really have time to think about, well, what's the effect on that piece of dirt I passed 2 seconds ago, of me moving past it, right? You don't have time to make those decisions, or you don't allow yourself the time because you're participating in the rules of scale. So I just wanted to acknowledge that data centers we need them, but the scale at which they're being deployed, is it worth the costs of deployment to humanity, right?
Well, there's following on from what you just said then, quote, even as hyperscalers have spoken loudly in public about the sustainability of their computing infrastructure, executives at Microsoft have admitted internally that the intermittent availability of renewable energy just doesn't cut it when data centers need to operate 24/7. Non-stop operation is considered so crucial that Google, Amazon, and most recently Microsoft now build their campuses in threes to have a backup for the backup in case any facility goes down.
Yeah, and there's a cost associated with using better energy sources and better solutions for, we can talk about water. I think is pretty important, right? So the idea that actually potable water is required for data center cooling in a lot of cases, and there's liquid cooling and there's a bunch of other cooling means that are being used, but the best one I think for the bottom line in a lot of these is potable water, because if you use things like wastewater, reclaimed water, it has effects on the infrastructure that it runs through, and could
Are they using it? Because so the UK just announced, well, Google announced that they're going to invest so many billion into UK AI infrastructure. And I was reading about some of the data centers and some of the data centers that already exist in England, obviously on a much smaller scale to what you've got over there. But not using water, do you? We need an expert on it. If you know, like how. I mean, she has to talk about the water usage in the book. I get that. I wonder how much of it is actually accurate now, 2 years later, and how much these big mega centers do need drinking water to cool them.
There are multiple methods to cool infrastructure. I just think at scale, and when you design a facility, you run through, okay, here are my requirements, here's the design criteria, here's how we want this thing to function, here is what we want from a sustainability perspective, and you cast out, you put together this vision, this narrative, and that narrative turns into engineering, and that engineering turns into budgeting, and that budgeting goes back for evaluation, and during a process that's called value engineering, which is an interesting term for cutting things based on budget. And some of those more forward thinking means of cooling of infrastructure kind of get whacked in the budget line, because you start thinking about this, and I'm just putting my CEO hat on, but we know that I will never be a CEO of a large global technology conglomerate,
Right.
due to my disposition, I guess. But which is more valuable in the grand scheme of things, putting together a design solution for water that doesn't take drinking water away from local community when there's a drought, or can I just put a solution in that'll allow me to buy more GPUs? So you start thinking about this economic equation versus, what's best for humanity equation.
It's not a fair equation.
So climate change, AI is going to solve climate change, right?
Well, you could use AI to become CEO of a big tech company as well, right? Chapter 13, the two prophets. So we okay. Quick recap: we get the OpenAI explosion because of ChatGPT 3.5. They need a lot more infrastructure, a lot more data centers, a lot more GPUs to make this thing not crash every 5 seconds. We get the move of data centers to Chile, to South America, and to Chile and Uruguay specifically. And then chapter 13, we move back stateside. We move to Washington, May 16th, 2023. It's the US Senate Judiciary hearing on AI. Sam Altman is on the stand. I really liked this chapter. I really enjoyed reading it. I really enjoyed learning. I really enjoyed thinking about the dynamics and the psychological. Again, we don't know if it's intentional. Maybe it's just his personality. He's not thinking, right, I need to do this, and this. It's just the way that some people are created. And before the US Senate hearing, he'd been on a world tour, the Sam World Tour, whining and dining and speaking to lots and lots of journalists and lots of politicians and lots of policymakers about his ideas. He'd spoke to the media, so the media were parroting what he'd said. Basically, he wanted like 3 steps he wanted to make AI safe, like a license for highly capable models, safety standards for dangerous models, some other things that basically suited OpenAI down to the ground. And he stood up in front of a bunch of senators who had no idea about AI and what the dangers were and what the systems were. And he was a messiah to them. They loved him. They wanted to be in his aura. They wanted to be in his space. If they spoke to him, they tweeted about, "Oh, I spoke to Sam Altman," and like it's just this. Who makes the rules? I make the rules. Thought it was very clever, very manipulative. Shifted attention, didn't he? Like the way that he wanted Congress to hear him. That there was nothing about the labor, nothing about the factory workers, nothing about the exploitation of resources, nothing about the demands on the planet right now. This was the
Nothing about IP.
AGI.
Nothing about
Nothing
IP.
about IP. No, it was just about, AGI. 2 things. Basically, number 1, China might get there before us, and you don't want.
Oh
China
God, stop! Hey, whoa!
us,
All right, we got to get there.
Enough.
Oh my gosh!
And like, and if it might be rogues, a super intelligent AGI, and we're all doomed, so we have to get there first.
I'd love to actually.
Went, yes, Sam. Yes, Sam. Yes, Sam.
Yeah, it was amazing how he was able to just pull people into this, like the Pied Piper, just, and everyone was just like, yo, this is great. This guy has got it all figured out. We don't have to do any work. This guy sounds like he knows what he's doing. But a couple of things, we start hearing about the idea of frontier models, this naming of potential models that could emerge from what is existing currently. And I wrote down this question: how could something dangerous emerge from a word predictor? And I want to have some really smart people on the show to help me unpack and understand that. But what he gave them, what they needed. He gave the politicians what they needed: an easy button to show that they understand how to determine if a model is dangerous. And guess what? We're going to use compute. We're going to use something called flops, floating point operations, right? And it's how the speed of computers are judged by floating point operations per second, or flops, right? And this arbitrary number comes out, 10 to the 26 floating point operations, right? Which is 10 with like 26 zeros or whatever on the end of it. But the compute itself, and a lot of researchers, jumped in on the other side of this. Compute thresholds is not a way to judge risk. You know what the way to judge risk of a model is? The training data, the ingredients, like the ingredients of the model. Like, all right, hey, you're cooking something in the kitchen. I want to understand what it is. I take a bite. I'm like, but I want to I can't understand what it actually is until I see you cook it and see what you're putting in there and understand all of that stuff. But
yeah, those floating point, that number as well was an arbitrary number that basically was what OpenAI had used for Chat GPT-4, but a little bit higher as well. So it was an arbitrary, anchored around something they already knew. And yeah, if you've got all those trillions or billions of floating points and it's just trained on Miyazaki films, you're not going to have the same risk as if it's trained on old Russian nuclear weapon manuals, is it? I mean,
but you scrape the internet, you get everything. You
on there?
You get everything, right?
You
but
you don't get everything, do you? You don't. There's some pretty gnarly stuff that's not on the internet, in the drawer of some.
How do you know? How do you know it's not on the internet? How do you know it's not on
Putin's locker?
Well, you have people like Deborah, and forgive me, Deborah, pronouncing your name, Raji, independent researcher. And here's the thing: there's a trend now of dwindling independent researchers in the world of AI because they're all scooped up by DeepMind, by OpenAI, by Microsoft, by XAI, by all of these people, right? So I love the stuff that Deborah has been saying or quoted in the book. People need more debunking hey, guess what? That's what we're doing on Thinking on Paper, Deborah. Come on and talk about the research with us. Um, yeah, holy cow. What'd you think about the bunker comment? What'd you think about the bunker comment from
No,
Sutzkever?
yeah, I've seen a few of them talking about their bunkers. Sam Altman said he's going to move to New Zealand, didn't he? Go live with Peter Thiel in their bunker, as if rogue AI is not going to hit New Zealand. Well, New Zealand's perfectly safe. Um, yeah, uh, um, yeah, megalomaniacs, aren't they? What I remember, do you remember a few years ago when Mark Zuckerberg went to Congress and he testified, and he was grilled by, I don't know which politicians they were, the senators that he was grilled, and they asked the most ridiculous questions about Facebook, about social media, questions which was, it was obviously abundantly clear that they had no idea what they were talking about. And this was to Mark Zuckerberg about social media. If those same people are here with even less idea of what they're talking about and what they're hearing and what they're listening to, and these are the people who have to make decisions for the rest of us, it's no wonder that when someone stands in front of them with a plan, with a strategy, who's built the biggest AI company in the world, and he stands there and says this, and this, you're just going to go, oh, yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, this guy. Whoa, yeah, he's right. Let's do that.
Easy
And
button.
just that. I don't know if it is. Yeah, is it an easy button? That's just like the human psyche, the human condition, where ego and just this, I don't know. There's so few people as well. There wasn't really anybody who could stand up and ask him the questions because they all work for him, or they all work together. There's nobody independent really, and the only people who are independent, as we see again and again in this book, just get pushed to the
Blasted.
side and hidden and blasted out of the picture, don't they? And I just over and over again feel that we can read these books and we can try and do our little bit to debunk at Thinking on Paper, but they're just gonna do what they do.
Let that kind of sit and settle. Yeah, there's you remember the stochastic parrots? I think it was
Yeah,
Emily Bender, a quote here. Yeah, we now have machines that can mindlessly generate words, but we haven't learned how to stop imagining a mind behind them. What a quote, man. Holy
yeah.
cow.
I think that one of the biggest things that I've learned in the last few weeks, listening to the people that on Thinking on Paper and speaking to you about this book and speaking about the last book that we read and the book before that and all the other stuff on Thinking on Paper at XYZ, was it's given me a real strength to not fall under the illusion. Like that, like my mind is so clear about that illusion now that I won't fall victim to it.
But that's
So
after you
if
and I
Thinking on Paper's done everything, it saved me, Jeremy.
but yeah, but that's because we've read multiple books on consciousness, multiple books on AI. We've talked about, we've broken down papers, we've done all this stuff. But like the trouble for someone who hasn't dove into that stuff yet can be manipulated by
Yeah.
these technologies and that sort of thing. We do have well one quick thing I want to hit, and then we do have I want to address a question that came up, and before we kind of get out of here, but this idea back to the technology, because guys, we're not anti-technology people. Like we appreciate technology and how technology can help humanity in the right ways and that sort of thing. And I I dig into the technology side of this, and we get into the language, or the philosophy of pure language versus grounding kind of coming up again in how you train these models. In pure language, basically you feed text in, fed by inputs, but grounding is more rooted in experience, right? So if you think about it, you can tell a computer what a rose is. This is more back to Federico Fajan, Irreducible, the book that we read. The rose has certain characteristics. It has a petal. architecture. It has a color. It's used for these things. But what the grounding philosophy means is that or that computer would need to have a memory of a pivotal experience triggered by the smell of a rose or something like that, right? So the sensory input of things. So I thought that was really interesting. I think it's really interesting to track because the grounding piece kind of pushes around the consciousness piece. Is it possible? Kevin Kelly thinks it's possible. If you haven't watched our Kevin Kelly episode, that was a great one. But Kevin Kelly knows a bit about technology, and he thinks we're going to get to consciousness with AI. Which yikes! So to our question, this is something we talk about a lot. The username here. Let's see, Desara PX, Desiree maybe Desiree. What do you think of the latest figures of the drop in neurological performance compared with people with AI tools and the implication on the education system? Schools increasing the use of AI. So my personal philosophy, I think there's a danger of us losing our ability to critically think in favor of a push button, quick, easy answer. I go back to a great Tom Waits quote that we are losing our sense of wonder, and having a sense of wonder allows us to activate critical thinking through curiosity and that sort of thing. And I think the danger of some of this stuff is more people are going to lean on the quick button, and that skill may atrophy, creativity may atrophy. So I don't know. What do you think about that, Mark?
I think that, well, just to answer the bit about we're tech neutral, this is a book about the dark side of AI. So we would be amiss if we didn't address the dark side of AI for most of the conversation, because that's what the book's about. I think it depends. Teachers play a role here. So I don't know how many schools there are in the world, millions, and every single teacher has a different viewpoint and a different stance and a different strategy of what AI is and what it should do to them and how they teach. And if how the teachers teach is the big thing, because if they all have AI, they will all use their teaching methods, but with that AI. So again, you'll have some who are freaking incredible and they push their kids to do great things, and AI will only augment that and help that. You'll have some teachers who suck, and it doesn't matter what tools you give them, they will suck, and the kids will suffer and they won't. And then you'll have some classes with different mixtures of those things. And teaching is the most difficult job in the world. And giving a teacher AI doesn't make that teacher good, doesn't make that teacher bad. It doesn't make those kids learn, doesn't make them not learn. It depends on the teacher. So is it a problem? Yes. Is it good? Yeah, it depends. And I know that's not a very good answer, but as someone who has spent some time as a teacher and seen the classroom, that's the reality. So some kids will suffer tremendously if they are using AI in the classroom, and some kids will flourish. I just would like for that ratio to be more one side than the other, obviously. And if someone can answer that, then come on the show.
Thanks for chiming in with your question. So chapter 14 is a part of this whole picture. I think, to me, one of the important quotes that we pull out of this picture. There's a family dynamic. Obviously, there's very unfortunate, if true, situation. I mean, we don't. It didn't show proof of anything. It didn't show proof of it not happening. But man, if what happened to his
I don't
sister,
think this chapter needs to be in the book, really. I think it kind of, it's yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you, but I agree with you.
No. It's tough. And the one quote in there that, it's obviously the chapters about Sam Altman's sister and the history and the treatment of the sister and that sort of thing, which again, super unfortunate and troubling. But the quote that stood out to me in this, and you guys can read through it as well, obviously. But quote, "OpenAI is a reflection and extension of the man who runs it." Wow. Okay.
Like
Deep
any
breath.
business.
Exhale. Onward.
We'll see you next week for the final part of Open AI. We'll see you next week for the final part of in 2 weeks. Oh my God, I'll get it all wrong. We'll see you in 2 weeks for the final episode of Empire of AI, Dreams and Nightmare in Sam Altman's Open AI, where we finish the story. But in fact, we don't finish the story because the story is only just beginning. This is a prologue to what comes next.
Man, I missed all of your comments in LinkedIn. I didn't have the right window open, but we will address all of them in the research and stuff you're doing at Orion.
I haven't got the window open because my computer can't handle it. Yeah.
At Orion and Resilient Communities has some great insight there. So we'll be commenting and responding there. If you have questions, comments, thoughts, ideas, put them in the chat either on YouTube or LinkedIn, and we will respond to all of them. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's keep the unseen in our purview, right? I think in our purview, and
not in our periphery, in our vision. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Be curious. Stay disruptive.
Keep thinking on paper.